Babylon Bee and its satirical take on culture and politics has been at the center of calls for censorship from those who find heroism in being offended and who think satire needs to be fact-checked. For the rest of us, the Babylon Bee is not only highly entertaining, but it is a critical counterpoint and a beacon for free speech and expression. So with that, please join me in welcoming the creative minds behind the Babylon Bee, CEO Seth Dillon and Editor-in-Chief Kyle Mann. I joked with a friend before they came up that you know who the CEO is and who the editor-in-chief is by the jackets, leather coat, no? So I want to start by asking, obviously it's a satirical site, but is your goal more so to make people laugh, or is it that the satire will make them think?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, what satire does is it makes you laugh and then it makes you think. That's the goal, and that's what that's how jokes have the most impact. You know, is that when somebody's laughing, their guard is down and they're willing to consider a different position. G.K. Chesterton said that humor can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle, and that's kind of become our motto.
Yeah, I mean, I second that. It's definitely laughing at. Some of the jokes are just about laughter, though. Some of them are pretty dumb. I mean, you mentioned the fact-checking. We did a joke about how CNN had purchased an industrial-sized washing machine to spin the news in before publishing it, which isn't really calling you to think too much.
That wasn't my greatest joke.
Pretty stupid joke, but it was hysterical that Snopes rated it false.
So people will know, some people might know that you were banned by Twitter. Can you give the context behind that for people who aren't familiar with why your account was removed before we get into the Elon Musk saving it from the abyss?
Yeah, well, the background for that one was we were responding satirically to a real news story that came out. There was this story in USA Today about how Rachel Levine, the transgender health admiral in the Biden administration, had been named Woman of the Year. That's funny. You can laugh. It's funny on its own. So, I mean, it's one of the challenges of our job is to satirize stuff like that. We say, both Kyle and I say this, we say, imagine if your job is to make jokes that are funnier than what Democrats are doing in real life. I mean, that's really the challenge that we're dealing with. So our response to that was to name Rachel Levine our pick for Man of the Year. And Twitter didn't like that very much. You know, they have a hateful conduct policy that includes misgendering and dead naming and all of those things. And so this fell under the category of misgendering, and so they locked our account. They didn't permanently suspend us on the spot. What they did was they locked the account, and they sent us a notice, and it said that this tweet violated the terms, and we need to delete it and admit that we engaged in hateful conduct. Check this box. It says, I admit that I violated your policies for hateful conduct. And if we delete it, then and only then could we get back on. And our position on that, our response to that was, well, it's not just censorship. Censorship would be if they took it down themselves. This is more like subjugation. They're asking us to like bend the knee. And I think that when you censor yourself, you're just doing the tyrant's work for him. So we never even really considered it.
What was the business calculation, though? Because you have your moral calculation and what you think is right, but when you talk about, especially independent outlets, and I've learned this quite a bit over the last 2 years, you know, sometimes those platforms really are so critical to the bottom line. So as CEO, what was the business consideration versus, you know, whether you kept it up or took it down?
Yeah, on kind of a moral principle, it was a very easy decision. It was like, this is the right thing to do, is not delete this joke. From the business side, it was a much more difficult situation because, you know, historically we'd driven most of our traffic through Facebook, but Twitter was second to that as one of our top traffic sources. So losing Twitter, just voluntarily saying, oh, we're just going to never tweet again, that's, you know, we'll be fine. I mean, that was over 30% of our traffic at the time. So we were cutting off a major traffic source by refusing to do that. So there was a cost to it, but it goes beyond just the traffic. I mean, Twitter is a place where conversations happen. It's where notable people were seeing our content and engaging with it and retweeting it. Everyone from Trump to Joe Rogan to Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson and everyone else. Like, these people wouldn't even know about us if it wasn't for Twitter. So the cost of being sidelined from that conversation was very substantial. But we really, I mean, how long did we deliberate before we decided we weren't going to delete the joke?
Not very long.
Maybe not long enough. I think it was probably
enough.
5 minutes.
Yeah, it was
5 minutes. We went back and forth and we're like, no, we're not deleting it.
What we said was, we're not deleting this, are we? That's what we said among ourselves. Just, there's no way we're going to do this, right? I mean, it just made so much sense from a principled stand that no matter what the business cost was, it really never crossed our minds that we would go back on our beliefs and delete that tweet.
Was there a business cost?
Yeah. Well, I mean, initially, when we first made the decision to not delete the tweet and we were locked out of Twitter, we got a lot of media attention. Our traffic actually increased. You get that Streisand effect, where when they try to shut you up, they draw attention to you. So there was but that only lasts for a brief period of time. You get that spike, and then you come down, and then you just don't have Twitter traffic. So we were in Twitter jail for 8 months. So yes, there was a significant cost to that, but
Worth it?
well worth it, yes.
So
Yeah.
Elon Musk buys Twitter, now X, which I still have a hard time calling it X. It just doesn't flow. But when did you realize that he was going to reinstate you without you having to acknowledge any sort of wrongdoing or bending the knee?
Well, it was a little bit of a process even when he bought Twitter, because we thought, like, we're saved, He's kicked down the door and he's stormed the gates and we're going to get freed. But he went in there and he found it was such a cesspool, of wokeness and people that were so opposed to us that it was going to take quite a while for him to flush everybody out of there. So it even took a while after he bought it for us to get freed, and everybody else who had their accounts locked, whether before us or after us, also to get their accounts done. But when Washington Post wrote a story on Elon Musk buying Twitter, and what they said was the very first thing that he told people when he walked in there was, free the Babylon Bee, So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. In the behind the scenes, which I recently asked him if I could talk about this, because he doesn't like when you talk about like private conversations that you have with him, but he said, sure, I could share this. But the day that he took over as CEO, he messaged me on Twitter and he said, do you want the bee restored? There will be no censorship of humor. So he said that on day one, and then it was, like a month later. But through that whole process, I mean, when we first got locked out, he reached out to us and he was concerned about the fact that we had been suspended, because he followed us and he liked our content, and he was upset that he wasn't going to be able to see our tweets anymore. So he was already in the process, though, of buying up Twitter stock and trying to get on the board and maneuvering to have more influence on Twitter, because he saw this huge looming threat to free speech there. There was so much that you couldn't say. There were things that you couldn't joke about. And then we get kicked off for this Rachel Levine joke, and he's like, you should be allowed to make jokes like this. This is insane. Comedy should be legal. So, we had a conversation with him at that point, and then we were just waiting to see, because he wrapped up that conversation going, well, maybe I need to buy Twitter. And so we didn't think he was serious. But then he makes an offer, and then he tries to get out of it. He's like backing out, and then they're suing him to make him go through with it. And so we were kind of riding that roller coaster throughout the whole thing. Is he actually going to buy Twitter? And then when he did and sent me that message, it was pretty cool. So he's taken a stand for free speech at a very high cost. $44 billion is not a small price to pay. And when we sat down with him a few months ago, we gave him an IOU for $44 billion. That's as good as cash, sir.
And Twitter, it can sound a little insider baseball, the ins and outs of if somebody can get banned from Twitter or not, but certainly social media and a platform like Twitter has such a profound impact on the American populace and what they see and what they don't see. And there have been stories, I'll just name, not to be controversial, but the Hunter Biden laptop story that was not only censored by Twitter, but they went as far as to prohibit people from sending that New York Post story via private message to other individuals, and then you fast forward 2 years and it's a mainstream media story. So under Elon Musk with Twitter, how do you think, if at all, that has helped to sort of even the playing field when it comes to conservative and liberal ideas and how they're reaching the American public?
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, the horrible things that have been happening in Israel in the past week, you know, we're already seeing, like, imagine that under old Twitter, the amount of information that you would be getting compared to what you are getting from people that are on the ground and what you're seeing out there. So it already seems like, you know, whatever you think of what Musk did with Twitter, that there is far more balance there than you even see in the mainstream media. And yeah, you bring up the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was a crazy thing, that there's a completely true story that gets banned from even sharing the link, and you have one of the oldest newspapers in America that gets banned from posting anything on Twitter because they reported a true story that didn't agree with the beliefs of the owners of Twitter. So things have definitely shifted in the landscape, and it's been a wild ride to be a little part of that, I think.
Yeah, well, and now, you know, there was just another publication that just named Dillon Mulvaney Woman of the Year. And so today we put out a headline, Dillon Mulvaney's our pick for Man of the Year. And we don't expect to get banned on Twitter for that this time around.
Not this time, yeah.
If we
More
do,
confident.
there might still be some old Twitter staffers there that snuck past the defenses and mess with us, but Elon's got our back on that one, I think.
We'll see if it gets us banned from Facebook, and then we'll see if Elon wants to buy Facebook, maybe.
I'm curious, what's your approach to handling, you know, truly tragic, horrific stories? Obviously, we're all thinking about Israel and the terror attacks by Hamas, and that's a huge story. I imagine you don't want to ignore it. I'll read just a few of the Babylon Bee satirical headlines that they have up on their front page right now about the situation in Israel. Israel cuts off Gaza from all updates on Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Ilhan Omar wakes up early to see what presents she got for Global Day of Jihad. So for you guys, when you approach a story that obviously has some serious depths of tragedy, but you're a satirical site, I mean, what's the limit? Well, how do you try to do that in a way that makes people think, that's funny, but doesn't cross some sort of point of no return?
Well, I'm not sure those are great examples, but my general principle is...
I winced at that first one.
My general principle is, you know, that jokes, the gravity of a joke, the seriousness of a joke has to match the seriousness of the topic. You know, we're never going to write a lighthearted joke about abortion because abortion is horrible. You know, and what satire does is it makes a very pointed, it sends a very pointed message to people about what your beliefs are when you're talking about something really serious. You know, I like the stuff that's just lighthearted and fun, and I really like those kind of jokes. But sometimes we really need to get a message across, and it's okay to do that about dark topics. In addition, I mean, humor helps us cope with these kind of things. I mean, it's such a crazy thing out there. It's such a world that's full of so much despair right now. I mean, you guys live in Washington State. I live in California, so I get it. You know, it can be depressing, you know, and I think satire and humor are gifts from God to help us to cope and to get through these things and to process. My wife doesn't read the news; she just reads the Babylon Bee and figures out what's happening in the world, and it's a much less depressing way to consume the news, I think. So, yeah, you know, obviously there's a line that you don't want to cross, and there's timing and there's considerations like that, but humor can really help us in times like this, I think.
Have you ever crossed a line and regretted it?
No.
Yes.
Yes? Which one?
Well, no, I mean, we've made some jokes that got a little bit of pushback because they happened too soon. Some of them are weird. Like we did one, there was a Hurricane Harvey flooded Houston, and we made a joke about how Joel Osteen was sailing through the flooded streets in his yacht, passing out copies of Your Best Life Now. And I think that was an example of a joke where maybe we're like, you know, people will think we're being insensitive about a real tragedy that's happening there, and they'd be mad about that. But no, they actually were wondering whether or not it was true, and it got fact-checked by the Houston Chronicle. That was the main objection to that one, is that it was confusing. Did this really happen? We've made a couple of jokes, you know, shortly after somebody's death, and sometimes that's been deemed insensitive. I don't know that, you know, we weren't making fun of them dying, though. Like, we did a joke about how the Ninth Circuit Court had overturned the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that was another one where I thought they would be mad that we were making a joke about Ruth Bader Ginsburg shortly after she had passed, but they thought it was true, and USA Today fact-checked it. So I don't know. Sometimes I think we're crossing the line, and everyone else just thinks we're telling the truth, and they're curious of whether or not it's false or not. I don't know. But
I mean, one time we had a guest at our office, and we were all pitching jokes about something, and someone ran in, because we were shooting a video, and someone runs in, and they said, hey, the Trumpy bear hasn't come in yet. We need the Trumpy bear for, and we were like discussing that we needed this Trumpy bear prop for, anybody have a Trumpy bear? We were talking about how we needed this little Trump teddy bear for this sketch, and we were all so serious about it, and this guest in our office started laughing, and they're like, you guys are so serious about being funny. That I think that's, every time we tell a joke, I'm like, oh, we should have worded it differently, or we should have changed something, and so we're a little desensitized to it, that we're always second guessing ourselves and trying to improve on our craft a little bit. I think.
But I will say this: what we want to avoid, and when we talk about like drawing lines, like it's not like I've ever given you instructions or you've given the team instructions. Like there's these really hard lines we never want to cross on certain sensitive topics, and certainly when tragedies are going on, we want to think about how we're doing it. Most importantly, because we don't want to have it be misperceived and people think that we have a different intent than we do with the joke, like we're trying to make light of the issue rather than actually making a point. But to the general issue of where the line should be drawn in comedy, I don't think we should have anywhere near as many lines as we have, because right now we have this safe space mentality, that you have this right to not be offended that trumps everyone else's right to speak freely, and I couldn't reject that more strongly. I think that we need to take ourselves less seriously. We have to be able to laugh at ourselves. Comedians are more likely now than ever to get punched by an audience member or banned and canceled for making a joke they weren't supposed to make. And so, I really applaud comedians who push back on whatever the prevailing narrative is, and they make the jokes they're not supposed to make, the ones that that they might get canceled for, and the ones that are considered over the line. Yeah, Bill Maher just recently did a whole thing about the gender-affirming care for kids thing, and he said, if we listen to kids, the world would be filled with cowboys and princesses. He's like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a pirate. Thank God no one scheduled me for peg leg surgery and eye removal. And you just laughed at hate speech. That was hate speech. It's funny. Comedians need to be willing to make those jokes, and it's not cruel to tell the truth through humor. It's not cruel.
Yeah. On that subject, who takes humor at their own expense better, liberals or conservatives? You could be honest.
Depends on who the target is.
Is there a politician that takes it particularly thin-skinned?
Name names.
Yeah.
Name names, yeah.
I find that anybody who has accepted their own, political beliefs as their own religion, like anybody who is so zealously religious about politics or worshiping a particular politician, is somebody who can't laugh at a joke. And we've seen that it's probably a little more common on the left these days, because for them, that is their religion and that is their salvation. It used to be that conservative Christians were the ones who were seen as not having a sense of humor about ourselves. And we were the ones who were furrowing our brow at jokes and pointing, you can't laugh at that, and you don't make fun of me, and all that. We were the punching bag. We were the people that were the jokes in all of the sitcoms and all of the movies, for the last 50 years. But now it's the left who have become the blindly religious about their beliefs, so much so that they can't laugh at themselves. And I think it's a really terrible thing to not be able to laugh at yourself.
That's a tactic too, though. They're trying to insulate their beliefs from being challenged, and humor is an effective way of challenging them. So I think some of it is a strategy. It's not it's true that there's this religious fervor and that they are deeply offended by these things because they believe them, whatever. But there's also this sense where I see, that there's a lot of censorship happening and a lot of willingness to fake outrage, to use that feigned indignation as a tool to bludgeon people into silence and submission. And I think it's manipulative and dishonest. And so it's, there's a couple elements at play there.
But there's also there's a few Trump fans out there who don't like when we make fun of him, though.
Yeah, for sure. To try to bring this conversation home, because you guys have really been at the center of this issue, what do you believe are the biggest threats to free speech in the United States today? I heard someone yell, "Say it." Do you know what he's going to say?
Well, there is this, cancel culture is a very popular topic right now, and there's this mob mentality. Everybody wants to kind of go along to get along and not be saying anything that's sensitive or that's offensive because everyone is acting so sensitive. But like I said, I think that it's speech suppression under the guise of, trying to protect people from harm and misinformation. What they're really trying to do is protect their bad ideas from criticism. That's really what's happening. But they're so good at it. They use your own values against you. They play on your emotions, and they try to make you feel like you're doing something wrong by even just saying something true, like men can't become women or get pregnant. Like you're supposed to be a bad person for uttering that. I think that's one of the greatest threats to speech is just the mentality that has been adopted by the left, and then that's pushed down on us by everybody in positions of power. Education institutions, corporations, politicians in government, the big tech companies, all of it they are all united in saying these are the things that you can't talk about, these are the things that you can't joke about, these are the things that you can't criticize. And so there's government coercion going on there behind the scenes, but then there's just this, mob mentality. They'll come down on you with great force. And so there's already pressure to conform without all of those threats. But when there's the threat of losing your job and getting canceled on top of it, people are censoring themselves at the highest rates they ever have. Yeah. And so I think that's really bad because then it's, when you're censoring yourself, like I said, you're doing the tyrant's work for them.
Yeah, and the social media companies, that's something that we never saw. You can applaud for Seth, that's fine.
Please clap.
The social media companies, are doing the work of the government, censoring people. Like, we literally have emails from the government to Facebook and Twitter saying, ban this person's account, suppress this post. Here's a few posts we want you to flag. And it's crazy that when Elon took over Twitter, he released all this stuff and just showed it to everybody, and nothing happened. There was no consequences for the government censoring people through a private company. And this is uncharted territory, because we always thought it would just be the tyrant coming from the government censoring you, but it's doing it through these private companies, so a little bit of a loophole in their minds.
Well, I think, Seth, something you mentioned is a really good note to end on, because I want to send folks home with something actionable, and I think he's spot on when he says that people are censoring themselves. And I think in Washington State, when we look at how come there's so many nonsensical policies being pushed, how come voters aren't doing things different, I think there is this huge swath here of reasonable people who've been scared into silence. And they're scared to speak up, and they're scared to speak their truth. So given that you guys stood your ground even in the face of what could have been very devastating for the business, what is your advice to people who want to speak up, want to tell the truth, but they're worried because they're just trying to live their lives and they don't know if they're ready for that fight?
Well, I said a lot I said before when we were dealing with this whole Twitter thing that the greatest accomplishment on Twitter is not going viral or generating a huge following or getting verified or whatever, any of those things. It's getting banned for saying something true. That's the greatest accomplishment on Twitter. If you're not willing to, thank you. If you're not willing to pay a price for something, do you really value it at all? And we're not even willing to give up our social media accounts for free speech. I try to encourage people to speak the truth boldly for a number of reasons, because it's the right thing to do, but also because when you do that, courage is contagious. It really is. It's like a good infection, and it spreads. And when people are conforming, they're trying to get along with everyone else, or they see everyone else saying that something is true, and so that they even start questioning their own sanity. Do 2 and 2 really equal 5? I don't know. Maybe they do. I'm serious. People are really starting to question whether or not these insane ideas really have merit to them. And every single voice, it doesn't matter if they have a huge platform or not, every single person who stands up and says 2 and 2 is 4, not 5, gives other people permission to also go with their gut and their common sense and stand up and say it too.
Well, Seth Dillon and Kyle Mann, we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate that clarity that you bring to really encouraging people to be brave. It's needed now more than ever, so thank you again.
Tell more jokes. Every joke is a tiny revolution, George Orwell said. I like that.
Could we get a round of applause for the minds behind the Babylon Bee?